Hello and welcome to another Beer Clipper video. And this video is about a subject that is dear to my heart, or not dear at all, warping. Now, I've done a few videos which I'll try to remember to link above here and also put down in the description below around warping, but I constantly still fight it. I've got a really good technique if you can have a little bit of waste material to prevent warping, but it does not always work. So what do you do if a piece warps completely out of control, so it's basically unusable? Well, that's what this video is about. So I hope that you find this useful and entertaining. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I really do hope that this does help, and that this maybe can help you to recover a piece that otherwise you would give up on. So thank you very much for watching, enjoy, and I'll see you again at the end. This was the last Battle Games Middle-earth build that I did, beginning first Tuesday in November, so you can go and check that video out if you want to. Really fun build, really great building ASoIAF ruins, but I had quite a bad problem with warping, as you can see on this particular piece and on the main big building as well. It's warped quite a lot. Now, I have used cardboard and I normally have no problem with cardboard, but the reason this happened is twofold. First one is I didn't do my normal anti-warping technique, so I didn't leave a lip, clamp it down and then get all of the wet work done before unclamping and then cutting off the clamping tabs. I just did it hoping it wouldn't warp, which obviously didn't work, and it warped badly because this is all air dry clay and that sucks moisture and dries out, and it does warp quite badly, as you can see. It's quite a pronounced warp. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this building and the other building. Going to do the processes to make it so that it can sit flat on the table. It is just too bad. I mean, if you have a look at this corner here and have a look at that side, it really is badly warped. As you can see, that's not really sustainable. So I'm going to do the processes that are going to be needed to recover that, show you how to go about doing that. I have pulled out this 1 centimetre blue foam, but it's not enough. The warp is too pronounced. I'm going to need to go and get a slightly thicker XPS, probably 2 centimetres should do it. So I'll get that and then I'll cut it to a little bit larger than the base currently is. And when I'm at that stage, I'll bring it back and show you how we're going to go about doing this. So here we have the other larger building, which doesn't have quite as much of a warp. I actually saved that through repeated bending and bending, but there's only so much of that you can save, so I am going to do a little bit more on this, and I'm going to use a different technique for this one. So we're going to do two techniques. This one I'm going to keep it on cardboard because I just want to prove that it isn't necessarily about the materials you use, but about what you do with the materials and how you interact with them. So we're going to keep this one on cardboard, and this one I'm going to actually make use of my traditional normal method. So what I'll do is I will cut out around this. It's almost going to be the same size as this cardboard, but I don't want it to be quite as deep. And then clamp this down to, maybe even just clamp this down to this table here and not move it, because it's actually going to be a relatively quick process. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill in around the sides with modelling compound, with the Luke's modelling compound, and when that goes off it will be very, very solid. And then I'm going to put air dry clay over the top of it so that we have the same grey cobbles, and it's just going to be slightly sloped. And that's what I'm going to do. It's going to be a very, very simple save, far simpler than the one with the XPS. So yeah, it really is about preventing the warp while you're doing wet work, while you're doing things that can cause warp, because warp is generally triggered by one of two things. One of them is actually the moisture getting into the material and causing it to deform itself. So this material that you're sitting on deforms, which is what happened here. The air dry clay actually drew moisture and caused the curl. And the other one is the effect of the material shrinking and pulling up what you're attaching it to. So if you clamp down the material that you're attaching it to really, really firm, you weight it down, clamp it down, whatever, then all that drying will happen and it will not bend because it won't be able to move. And then when it's dry, it stops bending because it's dry. So the impact of the moisture and what have you is dealt with. So yeah, so I'm going to clamp this down and get some modelling compound and glue this in place. I'll bring you along, show you how I do it, what the different stages are, but it's a very simple one. Most of the effort is going to be on the other build, which I will come to very shortly. So here we are. You can see I've placed this cardboard down and weighted it down with some weights that never get used for exercise. I always get used for my modelling. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to use PVA, normal PVA, and it's not really going to be very structural. It's going to be there to hold this in place, and then the security will come from the modelling compound that I use to fill in the sides. But I'll put this on now, brush this out using this knackered old brush, and then leave that until later on today. PVA does dry nice and quickly, especially when you spread it out like this. And then later on today I can come along and I can do the modelling compound so it can dry overnight. This should be a project that only takes a couple of days of actual real elapsed time and about maybe 40 minutes of effort at the most. Most of the effort is going to be in the air dry clay again, trying to get that and learning a little bit more about that. I get better and better every time I use it, though I'm still not very good. But yeah, most of the effort is going to be the air dry clay. Hopefully the rest of it will be quite quick. So yeah, so we'll leave that to glue down to this cardboard base like that, and then when I come to that tomorrow or later on this evening, I can come along, I can build up the little lip, a very small slope just around each of the edges, leave that to dry, and then air dry clay, and then we should be done. And you can see then that using the correct technique for avoiding warp works better than not using any technique. As I say, this one's a little bit more involved, but it's actually hopefully not going to be too crazily bad. So what I need to do first of all basically is draw around the outside of what I've got here, so I get a template of where the edge of this warped piece is. So I'll get that done. It doesn't need to be massively accurate because I've cut it out slightly bigger anyway and then fill in the gaps. But this will mean I'll be able to work now, put this away, work now, get it out of the way, won't have to knock it and risk damaging it. So there we are. So there we have the shape of our piece that we need to fix the warp. And as simple as it is, and it's a very simple idea and a very simple technique hopefully, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut about 1 centimetre deep, and basically I'm going to cut out this central section about 1 centimetre deep. Now you can funnily enough see that this piece actually that I'm using is warped, so I might actually need to go and get a different piece of XPS, because this XPS is actually warped. So I'm doing a how to save a warping video, and it doesn't help if the piece that you're working on is warped before you start. So I'm going to have to go and do what I've just done there again, get myself a different piece of XPS. This will just go in the scrap. It won't be thrown away, it'll be used, but it's not going to be good for something that needs to be straight. And I'll get back to this stage, draw around it again, and then I'll come back when I've done that and show you what the next step is. Can't believe that, look. I mean, I could potentially save this, I could clamp this down, but the problem I've got is it's such a wide section that I need to clamp in each of the corners, and that might end up being quite unwieldy. If I think about that, I will either replace this or try to make use of this slightly pre-warped build. I'll be back very shortly for you, probably not so shortly for me. I've had to play around with this, trying to get this clamped to 2 shelves. It's just not going to work, it's just annoying. I'm a bit irritated because it's what I was wanting to do. However, I have now come up with a better idea. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make use of the blue foam, which I was originally going to use before finding that the warp was too much. But I'm actually going to cut this and laminate 2 together. So what I'll do, I'm sure you've already guessed, what I'll do is I'll cut 2 squares that are identical size. One of them, I'll cut a hole in the middle and then glue the one with the hole in the middle to the top of the other one. And then I can sit this down inside, stick it in place, and then fill in anything I need to. I might end up using modelling compound for this as well. It's quite useful for these sorts of things, and then that will prevent the warp. So if I do that, what that means is this top one I will cut a stair into. So I'll cut a little step out, possibly on each side, so there's access up, or maybe even step it a little bit more aggressively than that. I'm not sure. Maybe even make the inner one slightly smaller than the outer one, so you have like a large step up to, so it looks like this is sitting on slightly on a plinth. Maybe this was a slightly higher value building or higher status building than it looked initially. So yes, that's what I'm going to do. So the first thing to do will be to work out how big I want the base, and cut out 2 squares that size, and then decide whether I want to have one smaller or not. Cut out the centre and glue them together. So I'll do my measuring and my cutting, and bring you back when I come to when I get to the next step, which shouldn't take me too long actually. I think this is going to work slightly nicer. The fact of laminating 2 layers together also acts to prevent warp. A lot of people say about you put tape on the bottom or paint PVA both sides, all those sorts of things. What they're doing is they're looking at counteracting the warp, and laminating 2 together like this is another way of counteracting warping. So this is showing a different technique that I didn't expect to show, but it's still useful, still something to add to your toolbox of anti-warp techniques. So there we are, we have this ring cut out, which can be stuck down to this, and this sits nicely in the middle, and it's actually too warped even for that 1 centimetre, if you can see that, but it's going to be fine. I'll be able to work that out. It does actually make it a bit easier for me to stick down. It doesn't mean I don't have to elevate the whole thing. What I'll do is I can glue down the middle and fill in the sides, and that will work quite nicely. So I'm just currently debating whether I'm going to stick down this first to the middle, and then put this around it and glue that down, and that would then mean that I'll be able to fill in the sides a bit more easily than if I stuck that down and then tried to set this in and what have you. So I'm just going to think about that for a bit, work out what I'm going to do. I have to stop hobbying now anyway, so I'm going to leave it like that. It's a good state to be in, and I'll come back later with a decision on what I'm going to do next, and of course I'll bring you along when I get there. So I've made the decision that I'm going to stick this down in the centre and then fill the sides in with some modelling compound, and at the same time I'm going to do the modelling compound around this, because as you can see this is stuck now, so I can shove a little bit underneath and then smooth it down and get that done. So I'll pop the camera on a time lapse and put some music on and get this done. It shouldn't take me too long, but yeah, I just figured it'd be nice. I haven't done a time lapse for a little while, so I'll just get that done. You can watch how I work it. Yeah, I need to move this tray as well. Yeah, so I'll pop some music on, and yeah, you can enjoy watching as I get this next step done. shaky cam. That took a little bit more material than I expected, certainly for this one. But you can see that I've got that securely weighted down with multiple weights. I've just put the ring on top, but there's weights all the way around that to keep it flat. And then past Rosie's Christmas present. Yes, I am very prepared. You can see here I've put the weights all the way around this one as well and built the ramp up for that. So one thing to point out is just how much water is leaching out of this here. And this is why it warps, you see. It's wet. If I left this, then it would curl. I mean, it would just turn into a pretzel. With weights on it, and I might even see if I can find some. I've got some heavy stones. I've run out of weights because this is about as much weight as I normally have to use. But I might put some heavy stones on these corners because the problem with cardboard and why people think it's rubbish, though it is perfectly good. I build lots with it now. Is that it does actually lift a little bit. So you can see, if I don't know if it's possible to see, there is a little bit of a give in that. So yeah, so there's a lot of weight is what you want really to keep it from lifting, from bowing and from curling. And when that's dry, and I might actually end up leaving that for 2 days just to be completely dry, because then it's not going to go anywhere. Bottom line, it's now that will be completely rock solid and won't warp at all. So that's how I'm saving it. I'll continue this video just to finish off with the next bit, which is going to be air dry clay around it, just to prove that that doesn't then cause more warping. And then obviously the air dry clay or the rest of the scenicking on this one. But ultimately that's how I've gone about saving these warps. So yeah, pretty pleased. And I think it adds something. This one being up a step, that's pretty cool. That one being up a little ramp. Towns, cities are not flat, and having little bits of elevation change makes it interesting for wargaming and also visually interesting. So it's not the end of the world. You just got to make the best of it, haven't you, when you make a mistake? Try and come up with something cool to make it even better. So this is nearly dried. The air dry clay that I put underneath, not the air dry clay, got that on the mind, I'm thinking about it, the modelling compound, and you can see that this little kind of step fits quite nicely around it. So what I'm going to do is glue that in place using PVA. I've just used my knife just before just to clean up some of this overspill. There's a few little bits, doesn't take very long to tidy up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour spread some PVA all the way around here, around the rim, and then stick this XPS loop in place, weight it down and leave it overnight, and by the time we get back to this should be dried. And then what I was thinking about, I can start thinking about putting air dry clay on and marrying it up. And I think that this actually is going to end up being this full size. I'm not actually going to trim this down at all. It's going to be okay at this size. So obviously saving the warp has caused this to become a much bigger piece, a much more dominant piece on the tabletop. But I think it's going to look quite nice. I'm quite pleased to have saved it. And I'm quite pleased that the idea I had to save it seems to be working quite well. So what I'll do is I'll weight that down again with weights. I'll leave it on my desk because I'm not going to have any time to do any more hobbying now, so I'm going to leave that like that. I can weight it down with my usual like these flat metal things and other weights, and then let that overnight. And by the time I come back to that, that should be all dried, in place, and ready to do the next step. So yeah, getting there on this now. A little bit of air dry clay after this, a bit of painting, and we're done with no warp, which is brilliant. So yeah, let's just weight all these down. I might need to put some more weight on some of them, but I've got weights, so they will be nice and secure, and I'll leave that to dry overnight. I've come back to this, pulled the little surround, and it just hasn't stuck with PVA. So what I'm going to do is run this glue around that I like, that I've started liking, which is the Extreme Power from Moment. And I almost did this last night anyway, but I didn't for whatever reason. And just goes to show, follow your instinct. this is going to hold it much better, much stronger. Puts me back a little bit because obviously I need to apply this now and then let that go off overnight. But then that means that that it'll actually hold it in place. It won't break during play and all that stuff, which is obviously a risk with if your PVA is not holding, then it could break. So yeah, just going to use this glue. So we'll apply that all the way around, squash the thing back in place like this. Clean up any overspill, because one of the things I've found with this glue is it really doesn't it doesn't really paint very well, which is why I've tried to put the glue on the inside towards the inside, and then because it's actually going to be a little bit sloped, which is fine. There we are. So that now will stick. Hopefully I'll leave that overnight, come back to that tomorrow and finish it off. We're not far off on this actually. The next thing I'm going to do is put some air dry clay, I think. So yeah, we're not actually that far off having this saved. And while I'm at it, let me just do a quick super pan zoom. This one is also coming on nicely. It's totally flat, completely dry, and I'm going to be moving on to the finishing steps for that as well next. This is now totally dried and secure and isn't pulling away anymore, which is exactly what I want. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to start working on the air dry clay, which I'm going to put around each of these edges. And I just thought I'd talk through how I'm going to do it. Probably most of this off camera because it's just going to be repetitive, but at least you can understand what some of the thinking is. I'm going to do the air dry clay on this top step first, and then I'm going to weight down the sides again like I did before to make sure that that doesn't pull anything up. And then what I'm going to need to do is it's going to take time, and that's one of the things that sometimes you apply to prevent warping is time. So I will then do air dry clay from here to here and from here to here. So do those two back bits. And I could even do that at the same time, to be honest, but I'm not going to. I'm going to do the top first. And then I'm going to weight down here, here, here and here. And that will prevent any warping from this air dry clay. Leave that for a couple of days. There's going to be a couple of days between each of these processes. And then when that's fully dried, I can do the strip of air dry clay down here, and I'll be able to weight here and here because this air dry clay will be dry, and then that will prevent all the warping from that as well. So I'm just going to have to go like that. I don't think there's any other way around it. But once that clay is dried, it shouldn't then warp with the painting or what have you, because it will be pretty solid. So anyway, that's what I'm going to do. Air dry clay, get the same roller, the same kind of like I've got a smaller one. I think someone asked me in the comments whether I had a smaller cobblestone roller. I do, so I'll use a smaller cobblestone roller and get that done. And then when it's finished, when I'm probably halfway through, I'll try and film again. But yeah, so I'll just make use of that and do all of this top one with the air dry clay, and then it'll be a case of painting it and we're done. So. And it's not warped. I mean, it's not warped at all now, which is just great. It's quite heavy, but that's fine. It means it doesn't get knocked, and it's going to look really good on the tabletop. So yeah, let's get applying some air dry clay. I've done the first one, and now I'm basically going to do exactly the same thing for this one. So air dry clay around the new area here, and then I'll put it back over to that end of the bench with the big weights and weight it down. And then it'll be a case of painting and then cutting out. So yeah, same process. Air dry clay, I've got some scraps here, so PVA glue, press the air dry clay onto it and then leave it to dry. So I'll get that done, and this one will probably get finished first, funny enough, because the other one, as you've seen, is going to need to be done in stages. This one I can do the whole lot now because I have offcuts, I have access here to put weights on. You can see it's not warped at all in the middle. There's something actually uneven under there, I think. So yes, it's not warped at all. So yeah, keep it weighted down, and that will now continue to be good and become a really nice centerpiece for my table. So yeah, get that done, and I will show what it looks like when I'm about to start painting. Right, it's taken me all week to get this done, mainly because of being slightly busy at times and just leaving it for ages to dry. I put on the final bit of the air dry clay on this last night. You can see it's still a little bit wet over here, a little bit moist, so it still needs to go off a bit. But this one, the big one, has definitely finished pretty much, and I'm probably going to be able to start painting and then cut that out. So I'm going to do that. I'll be doing exactly the same technique, so I'll paint it black, let it dry, and then grey, and then finally do maybe a little bit of an overbrush over the whole thing. I'll probably put some more rubble on as well, so I might do that before I paint. I might glue some rubble on just in places, and then when I come to do this, I'll do the same. So we've got some quite big steps here that I could probably do with having some rubble and other things against them, but I'll do that when this air dry clay is fully dried. But yeah, it's worked really well. There's no warp on them now, and I think they actually look better than they did. I'm actually think I've improved them with this recovery, which is always nice. So yeah, so probably the next time I'll show these will be when they're done, and I'll talk through how I went about with the rubble. But they're pretty much saved. That's how I went about saving a pretty dramatic warp. Certainly on this one was very dramatic, and I think that they've come out looking really, really nice. I came just now to paint this, and then I realised that actually I need to put the detailing on first, particularly for this one. So I may have made a mistake on the other one in not having done this before painting the black on, because there's actually quite a lot of gravel that I want to put on. So I'm just using my number 2 gravel, which is not the smallest that I use for sand, and the texture paint that I put on here is the size up from that, and I'm just scattering it on. I'm not going to do anything bigger than that. So you can see just a liberal application of my terrain glue, and then come along with a spoon and put it over the top. Now I'm deliberately not doing the wet application, which would involve alcohol and putting the gravel on first and then spraying alcohol and then using a dropper to put on the glue, because I'm aware of warping, obviously, and that is a technique that you should use only if you're absolutely able to fully clamp to prevent warping. So this is going to have to be sat here until it dries, and then I'm going to come over very carefully tomorrow, because it dries quite quick, and put more PVA, more white glue over the top of the sand to seal it in place. So I'm going to do it the more old-fashioned way that I've always done historically. So I get that done. That will look really nice when it's finished. It's covering up the gaps, looking like a lot more of a ruined kind of like layout. And after that, then paint it black, paint it grey, done. So yeah, I know I said I wasn't going to do another clip, but thought I'd share that. Alright, this is done now. So let's get the knife and cut it out of the cardboard. And then the whole thing's completed, which is really, really cool. And like I said, I actually think I prefer it. So happy accidents and all that. There we are. Wasn't too hard at all. Good, nice new sharp blade. I bought some new knives because they were on sale in Lidl. So yeah, pretty happy with that. And I think that will look really, really nice as a central piece on an ASoIAF board. And yeah, it's not warped anymore, so that's always a success. So yeah, brilliant. I'm really pleased that I saved that. Well, there we are. That was a very successful recovery, and as you can see from those pictures which I took just now, which is months since I did the actual repair work, they've not warped again since. So double thumbs up win, I think. I hope that's helpful, gives you some inspiration, maybe recovers some terrain that you maybe you're looking at and thinking, you know what, that's just so rubbish, I'm going to bin it. It's often not the case. You often can recover it. So thanks for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Really appreciate every one of you, particularly those who have made it this far. And as I always say at the moment, particularly if any of you are directly or indirectly impacted by the horrible war in Ukraine, then my thoughts go out to you and anyone you know. And everyone, please do stay healthy, stay safe, and stay well.